In this video, I'm going to show you how to open, edit a real Microsoft Word .docx file directly inside the Next.js application. And we'll be using a React package that make this surprisingly simple. The package I'm using is eigenpal/docx.js editor. This package allows us to load a .docx file as an array buffer and render it into a fully editable document inside the browser. And also no server required. So let's take a look on this docs right here. And as you can see, this is basically the live demo. And in here, you can upload any .docx file, you can edit it, and you can save that, right? This is the demo. You can do whatever you want in here. Like for example, insert image. I'm going to, for example, insert this image right here. And here we go. As you can see, it works, right? You can change the size in here, just whatever you want. It just works. And everything in here works basically. The heading right here, you can change that whatever you want. Like for example, this one, heading 2, the size of the document, 125%, whatever. The font, right? The font size and bold, italic, whatever it is, it just works. The font color. And even I see right here, we can create a table. So let's take a look, insert table. Here we go. As you can see, we can insert a table. So anyway, we are going to build this one right here. So similar with the live demo of the docs right here. And basically you can upload any document, you can edit, and you can save that. For this video, we are going to use Next.js, but you can also using that inside a feed, I believe, Next.js, Remix, and Astro as well. So let's take a look at the few example in here. It should be redirect you to the GitHub. And as you can see, this is just the example. I'm going to go to component and /editor.docx. If you open the code example here, I think there's a lot of code in here. I'm not going to start from this example. So let's try to go back in here. And I think I'm going to start from this one right here. So let's first generate the brand new Next.js application. I'm going to call that open docs. So the first step, of course, we have to install the package. I'm going to copy this command, go back to the terminal and paste that. And the next thing is we need to create the editor component inside the component folder. I'm going to copy this one and create components folder. And basically we have to just copy and paste all this code and try to just see what happened. And of course, I'm going to say npm run dev. So let's close the terminal. Let's take a look. The component, it just looks super simple. So I just want to make sure I export this component called editor. And this component is like a props called file. And the file is basically array buffer. And as you can see, what we return in this component is just a button to save the document. And this is the important part, docs editor. And what we pasted in here is basically a ref. Ref is come from the editor ref, all right? And then we have document buffer is come from the props. That's it. So let's try to render this editor component to the page.tsx. Go to app and then page. Now let's take a look at the result on the browser. As you can see, we have this error. The reason is because the editor component should be client component. So we have to make sure this component should be client. So let's take a look on the browser, the result. As you can see, we have this no document loaded. So it means this is successfully rendered, right? There's no error. So the question now is how we can render the document. First, I just want to get some random document from the docs in here, for example. So let's just take a look in here. I'm going to refresh it. And then I'm going to just download this default value. I'm going to save that. So anyway, I just download and copy and paste the document to this public folder. As you can see, we have public/document.docs. And now we have to make sure on the home right here, the way we import the editor is we have to using, let's take a look at this example. We have to using dynamic import in here. So I think I just want to copy this variable. In here, we have to make sure it should be // and then the dynamic, it should become from the next dynamic. For the loading, because we're using Tailwind CSS, of course, I just want to remove this and try to put my styling from Tailwind CSS. Now we need to just remove this editor import from the top, and we're using this editor right here basically. So let's take a look at the result. Of course, it should be still same, but we get an error. Because we're using dynamic import, of course, this component, it should be client component. Before we fetch the document from the public folder, I'm going to create state in here, right? The state is basically call file buffer. The type is array buffer or a null. And then in here, I'm going to run use effect, right? And this is basically, I'm going to fetch the document inside this use effect on the first render, because this is going to be the default document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say fetch, right? So let's just put the slash document, and then we have to make sure that we grab the response as an array buffer. And then after that, I'm going to send the buffer into the state. As you can see in here, I make sure the response is array buffer, and then I make sure I put the buffer value into the set file buffer into this state. And then I'm going to send this file buffer as a props in this editor. So we can say like a file set equals to file buffer like this. So let's take a look on the browser. I'm going to refresh, and as you can see, guys, we just done, right? As you can see, the document is just render. Really cool. And basically in here, everything is just works. As you can see, I'm going to try to upload an image in here. Let's try to open, and here we go. It works, right? Amazing. And all of this is basically works. I'm going to make this, for example, red color, whatever you want. I'm going to change the highlight to yellow, and it works, right? As you can see, we have this error. It's just because file buffer sometimes is undefined. So that's why in here we have to make sure if the file buffer is undefined, just render this loading document. So the question now is how we can save the document after we make a changes. As you can see on the editor.docx, if we have the buffer value, what we are running in here is fetch in this URL, and the method is put and send the buffer as a body. So that's why now we have to create a route, right? So I just want to copy this one right here, go to app, and then create that file, route.ts. In here, I'm going to make sure I create function called put, because we are going to make a put request. And then in here, we can grab the params ID, because we create ID folder in here. And inside in here, I'm going to run try and catch. So let's do try and then catch. So for the catch, I just want to running this catch right here. Really simple, right? Just return next response.json, success false, and status 500. So here, I'm going to create a variable called params equals to await for the props.params. Here we go. And then now we can grab the ID inside this try. I'm going to create variable called buffer, and then I'm going to create variable called ID. So the buffer is basically a wait for the request.array buffer, because in here we send the buffer as a body. So that's why we can grab that buffer in here as a request.array buffer, right? We grab the buffer value and then the ID value. And the next thing is I'm going to create variable called file path equals to. In here, I'm going to create path.join. So this basically will create the path into the public slash a document and whatever the id.docs. I'm going to run await and then write file. This is the way we write the file. And then the file, I'm going to writing that inside the file path. And then the file is going to be buffer.from this buffer come from the await request. The reason we get this error is because the write file, it should be import from the fs/promise, not just fs. Let's try to save the document. Here, I'm going to, for example, upload an image, right? I'm going to insert image in here. And also, for example, I'm going to create another table in here. So let's try to insert the table. There we go. And yeah, I think we're done. So now let's try to save that. If I click save, now as you can see, nothing just happening on the browser. But if you take a look on the public, now we have this document -1 docs. If you open this document, for example, on the page in here, I'm going to grab that document -1, save. And now I'm going to reload. And as you can see, it's just render, right? We have this image, we have also this table right here. So it works. Normally on production application, you have to make sure you store the file into the, for example, Amazon, Cloudflare, Supabase storage, upload things, whatever you want. Don't store that on the public, but this is just for example. So I just want to make it that simple. So now we have another question, how to upload a file, right? Because now there's no functionality of that. So let's go back to the page in here and I'm going to create input, right? This input is basically for upload a file and accept just .docs file. Let's just create the handle upload function. I'm going to create the function in here. As you can see, this is called handle upload. This is basically async await function. This is the event type and etc. We grab the file. This is the way we grab the file, right? And then if there's no file, just return nothing. And what we have to do in here is basically really simple. First, I'm going to create a variable called buffer and await for the file.arrayBuffer. That means we change the file into the array buffer. And then now we are going to set the file buffer into that buffer come from the upload. That's it. So now let's take a look if that works. Here we have this choice file to upload, right? I'm gonna click that. So anyway, I just create this really simple document from the Google Docs and save that. And now let's try to grab that file. Here we go. Now I'm gonna open that and that's it, right? All this is just render really nice. And of course, we can just styling this wherever we want and we can save that. For example, I'm going to make sure this title into bold and maybe I'm going to change the color to like this one right here or whatever, right? And now I'm going to save that. If I click save, as you can see, it's basically not gonna be works. It's just because on the road, as you can see, create this document -1, right? Because the ID now is 1 and we already have that. So we need to something to generate a random number and we have to putting that in here. I just want to use really simple solution using crypto.randomuuid and paste this document ID into the string right here. I'm going to click save and let's take a look. Here we go. As you can see, we have this document -randomuuid and .docs, right? It works. So all functionality of this app is basically done. You can now styling these to whatever you want. For example, I'm going to go to the page.tsx and then I'm going to paste this styling right here. So let's just take a look. This is just basically really simple. We have this heading 1, we have this upload, right? If we have a file buffer, it shows this editor. If we don't have file buffer, it shows loading document. And just really simple. So let's take a look. Here we go, right? We have this one right here. We have this upload new document. And now let's just styling also the editor component. I just want to copy and paste anyway. So let's take a look what we have in here. As you can see, we have this top bar that have this save button with this heading 1 as well, and also the editor area. So let's take a look. This is the result, right? Really simple. But the problem now is we don't yet have the download functionality. So let's create the state first. I'm going to create state called file URL and I'm going to use state in here. The value is string or null. The way we get the file URL is really simple because on the road we already send the file document-id.docs right here. So we can grab that. Here after we click the handle save inside that function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this one right here. So the rest is basically come from here. So I'm going to create a variable called rest equals to await. Okay, here we go. So now we have this file URL. And now let's create the download button. So under the save button, I'm going to create this if we have file URL, create this anchor tag with href file URL and the download keyword to true and then the text is download. That's it. So now after we make a change in here and then I'm going to save that, now we have this download button. If I click that, of course it should be download the document, right?